Chapter 2, Section 5, The Function of the Miracle Worker. Before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it is essential that they fully understand the fear of release. Otherwise, they may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. This misperception arises in turn from the belief that harm can be limited to the body. That is because of the underlying fear that the mind can hurt itself. None of these errors is meaningful because the miscreations of the mind do not really exist. This recognition is a far better protective device than any form of level confusion because it introduces the correction at the level of the error. It is essential to remember that only the mind can create and that correction belongs at the thought level. To amplify an earlier statement, spirit is already perfect and therefore does not require correction. The body does not exist except as a learning device for the mind. This learning device is not subject to errors of its own because it cannot create. It is obvious then that inducing the mind to give up its miscreations is the only application of creative ability that is truly meaningful. Magic is the mindless or the miscreative use of mind. Physical medications are forms of spells, but if you are afraid to use the mind to heal, you should not attempt to do so. The very fact that you are afraid makes your mind vulnerable to miscreation. You are therefore likely to misunderstand any healing that might occur, and because egocentricity and fear usually occur together, you may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. Under these conditions, it is safer for you to rely temporarily on physical healing devices because you cannot misperceive them as your own creations. As long as your sense of vulnerability persists, you should not attempt to perform miracles. I have already said that miracles are expressions of miracle-mindedness, and miracle-mindedness means right-mindedness. The right-minded neither exalt nor depreciate the mind of the miracle worker or the miracle receiver. However, as a correction, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. In fact, its purpose is to restore him to his right mind. It is essential, however, that the miracle worker be in his right mind, however briefly, or he will be unable to reestablish right-mindedness in someone else. The healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. You are perfectly safe as long as you are completely unconcerned about your readiness, but maintain a consistent trust in mine. If your miracle working inclinations are not functioning properly, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness and has turned it upside down. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If you do accept it, you are in position to recognize that those who need healing are simply those who have not realized the right-mindedness is healing. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. This means you recognize that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. Once you accept this, your mind can only heal. By denying your mind any destructive potential and reinstating its purely constructive powers, you place yourself in a position to undo the level confusion of others. The message you then give to them is the truth that their minds are similarly constructive and their miscreations cannot hurt them. By affirming this, you release the mind from over-evaluating its own learning device and restore the mind to its true position as the learner. It should be emphasized again that the body does not learn any more than it creates. As a learning device, it merely follows the learner, but if it is falsely endowed with self-initiative, it becomes a serious obstruction to the very learning it should facilitate. Only the mind is capable of illumination. Spirit is already illuminated, and the body in itself is too dense. The mind, however, can bring its illumination to the body by recognizing that it is not the learner, and is therefore unamenable to learning. The body is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind that has learned to look beyond it toward the light. Corrective learning always begins with the awakening of spirit and the turning away from the belief in physical sight. This often entails fear because you are afraid of what your spiritual sight will show you. I said before that the Holy Spirit cannot see error and is capable only of looking beyond it to the defense of atonement. There is no doubt that this may produce discomfort, yet the discomfort is not the final outcome of the perception. When the Holy Spirit is permitted to look upon the defilement of the altar, he also looks immediately toward the atonement. Nothing he perceives can induce fear. Everything that results from spiritual awareness is merely channelized toward correction. Discomfort is aroused only to bring the need for correction into awareness. The fear of healing arises in the end from an unwillingness to accept unequivocally that healing is necessary. What the physical eye sees is not corrective, nor can error be corrected by any device that can be seen physically. As long as you believe in what your physical sight tells you, your attempts at correction will be misdirected. The real vision is obscured because you cannot endure to see your own defiled altar. But since the altar has been defiled, your state becomes doubly dangerous unless it is perceived. Healing is an ability that developed after the separation, before which it was unnecessary. Like all aspects of belief in space and time, it is temporary. However, as long as time persists, healing is needed as a means of protection. This is because healing rests on charity, and charity is a way of perceiving the perfection of another, even if you cannot perceive it in yourself. Most of the loftier concepts of which you are capable now are time dependent. Charity is really a weaker reflection of a much more powerful love encompassment that is far beyond any form of charity you can conceive of as yet. Charity is essential to right mindedness in the limited sense in which it can now be attained. Charity is a way of looking at another as if he had already gone far beyond his actual accomplishments in time. Since his own thinking is faulty, he cannot see the atonement for himself, or he would have no need for charity. The charity that is accorded him is both an acknowledgement that he needs help and a recognition that he will accept it. Both of these perceptions clearly imply their dependence on time, making it apparent that charity still lies within the limitations of this world. I said before that only revelation transcends time. The miracle, as an expression of charity, can only shorten it. It must be understood, however, that whenever you offer a miracle to another, you are shortening the suffering of both of you. This corrects retroactively as well as progressively. So, this section, Healing as Release from Fear, really differentiates what healing and miracles are. So, just to break it down, the miracle is the means, the atonement is the principle, and healing is the result. So, I think for me, doing a lot of healing work and thinking about and witnessing healing a lot, there's definitely a lot of emphasis that people seem to place on the result, and thinking that the result is the goal, as opposed to the healing is just the result or what happens because of the shift in the mind, essentially. And even this phrase, healing is not a miracle. People associate miracles with some sort of healing. And the more tangible, then the more clear that the miracle is. But it's really, this is A Course in Miracles, and we're really getting nitty gritty in differentiating what healing really is and what miracles really are. And I just think this breaks it down so simply. The atonement, or the final miracle, is a remedy, and any type of healing is a result. So, really, the aim is to focus on the right mindedness, the one mind, really truly seeing and feeling and experiencing from a place of the perception of oneness. And when one can truly achieve that, then healing just naturally occurs. And I think a lot about Jesus and all the miracles that he performed, but they happened spontaneously. They happened because he was in that state of oneness in his mind. And I don't think that he was intentionally trying to fix any sort of illness directly. I think his intention or goal was to have the right mind, and through that, then naturally all kinds of healing occurs. There's a lot of confusion in the experience of being human by having a body, being in this physical world, and a lot of denial as well. Okay, so this section is super interesting and helps to get a lot of clarity in a very simple way, as is a lot of this text, even if it seems super thick, even if it seems super complex, even if the wording is not the most palatable, it still brings it down to the most simple concepts. So I'm just going to highlight a few points that I underlined here. One is that magic is the mindless or the miscreative use of mind. And that physical medications are forms of spells, but if you're afraid to use the mind to heal, you should not attempt to do so. In the past, I had a lot of debate with someone about the use of magic versus like the atonement, essentially. And he would kind of push away the use of magic, and magic, again, being like physical medications or using the mind in creative ways to try to heal, and not from the perspective of just simply oneness perspective, but all the many other healing modalities that exist. And this here, though, just says that the very fact that you're afraid makes your mind vulnerable to miscreation. So, and also that under these conditions, it's safer for you to rely temporarily on physical healing devices because you cannot misperceive them as your own creations. As long as your sense of vulnerability persists, you should not attempt to perform miracles. So, what this is saying is basically use whatever tools that you have until you're ready. So, if you don't really truly believe in miracles, if you don't believe in your right-mindedness, if you don't believe that simply coming to the atonement or the at-one-ment is going to heal, then use whatever temporary healing devices are necessary. And in a way that's better than trying to be in denial about where you are, or being in denial about the fear. That this section 4, healing as a release from fear, that actually there's a lot of fear that we have. Fears of messing up, fears of not getting it right, fears of getting stuck in sickness, fears of all kinds of fears. And so it's just kind of really being accepting of wherever you are in your own healing journey and using whatever tools are available, but without being deluded that that's ultimately it. So it's kind of like that concept in Buddhism where if there's someone who is using a boat to get from one side of the river to the other, and that boat is basically like the temporary healing device. So you can use this boat to get from one side to the other before you learn how to walk on water yourself. But the idea isn't to, once you cross the river, to keep carrying that boat with you. You just leave it there as you need it. And so the same thing with these temporary healing devices is use it when you need it, but don't be deluded that that is what's going to bring you to the final miracle or the final atonement. And so, yeah, miracles are expressions of miracle mindedness, and miracle mindedness means right mindedness. So, and as a correction, the miracle need not await the right mindedness of the receiver. So, let's say it's you and another person, and you don't need to wait for the other person to have a miracle. If you just focus on right-mindedness within yourself, then you don't need to worry about them. In fact, it's kind of a trick, because if you're perceiving that the other person is not in their right-mindedness, then you get stuck in you being not in your right mind. So this is really, it just keeps bringing it back to yourself. So the function of the miracle worker is really just to have the right-mindedness for yourself. So I'll just quote this here. The sole responsibility, and it's in italics here, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. Once you accept this, your mind can only heal. So really, your number one focus, your number one job isn't to try to go around and heal other people. Not at all. Actually, it's focusing on having atonement for yourself, period. I teach a healing modality. I do healing sessions all the time. And I would say that when I started, I was really excited about witnessing healing and about seeing the changes and getting the feedback that, whoa, my whole life has changed, or whatever happened in a positive way. I was so excited to witness that for myself. And I also could see for myself and for others how it can be almost like addictive to want to help others, but then to not also look at yourself. And so for me, it's the whole process of studying with A Course in Miracles over the last almost 10 years is just a constant bringing it back to myself and using that concept through any healing modality that I'm working with. If I'm working with plant medicine and something in the space comes up that triggers me or makes me uncomfortable, instead of trying to figure out, oh, what this person might need or what the whole space might need or how I can help it, instead I'm like, what does that mean for me? How can I bring this back into my own mind? And how can I bring myself back to this perception of oneness? It becomes kind of simple in that way. And the more that I practice that, the more that I witness real miracles happening, and the more that I experience peace within myself.